And welcome back to the Betoota Advocates weekly interview, Betoota Talks. This is part 2 of an interview that we started last week. You might have listened to part 1 with Carolyn Wilson, also known as Caro, the famed AFL writer. She's done all the biggest yarns. We've spoken about some of them last week, and we're going to talk about, a few more of the big scoops, but also, the life and times of someone who's been this close to the game and also had to keep, an arm's length from the game throughout her 40-odd year career. We talk about the fairy tales of Aussie rules, and there's plenty of them. There might even be a couple this year. So thank you for tuning back in. Stay tuned for a bit more of Caro, part 2. Yeah. Do you believe in this madness of excellence? Like, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm realizing you've got and have had more access to these, Australian sports superstars, more so than anyone I've ever met before. So someone like Wayne Carey, just such a complicated kind of person, but such an excellent footballer. And do you think those two things go hand in hand quite often? And is that something you have to navigate as a journalist? The tumultuous childhood, the social issues, the personal issues, the la.
Yeah, I think sometimes with brilliance.
Yeah.
It can be born out of damage, or it leads to like brilliant artists.
Yeah.
And there's substance abuse issues.
It can twist you up. Yeah.
Ben Cousins is a classic example. Wayne, I've got a relationship with Wayne, and I believed in his redemption.
Yeah.
When he wrote that book and spoke about his appalling childhood, which was just, punctuated by abuse from the word go, and went on to become such a brilliant player. But, he single-handedly sort of tore apart that footy club. And then, he got chance after chance after chance, and, he can't be that unlucky. There must be I know he always denies it when he gets into trouble these days, but I'm just not sure I actually believe him. I see he's doing a show at a gentleman's club in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
I think in Tasmania. I'm not sure his rebranding is going all that well, the old
good
Wayne.
learner.
He was on Sam Newman's podcast. I think I saw.
Yeah.
Another branding mistake in my view.
Yeah. Do you remember the first kind of big scoop or scandal as a young footy writer where you went, wow, this could be really big, or this could affect my potential relationships with a player that I see regularly or have a good working relationship with?
Well, one of the biggest stories was in the late 80s when the Sydney Swans it was the post-Edelstone era, and they were training out at, I think it was Pennant Hills, I should say, and I remember my sports editor, it was a really pioneering sports editor by the name of Jeff Slattery, great writer himself, said, go up and find out what's happening. And I went up there, and I remember Wayne Henwood, who went on to become a member of the AFL judiciary as a judge or a senior lawyer, I can't remember. Something had gone wrong at the training session, and there was no physio to look after him, and he cracked it. And another player, ex-bomber Merv Nagel, had had his car repossessed and the bills weren't being paid. And I remember I was just there for a day talking to all these footballers, and I went home that night and I just knew I had a great story. And flew back to Melbourne, wrote it all up. And a few journos said, that was just a capsulation of everything we thought was happening. But I was like, no one else had been up there and actually and I had people on the record, I had evidence. And 2 days later, the AFL called a special meeting and went to Sydney, set up a support package. So that was probably the first time I did something really meaningful. Predicting, coach sackings, I guess, is early on was always a bit scary and a bit precarious, but always they were always good stories. And the Carlton salary cap scandal of the early 2000s, someone tipped me off that there was something dodgy going on, and I had no idea of the size. I had no idea of the size of the Melbourne tanking scandal when even though it was obvious looking back what they were doing that year. And then the coach got sacked, Dan Bailey, and he sort of almost said it happened. The AFL hid it, and they couldn't hide it anymore because one of the players, Brock McLean, said something on a footy show. And I started to get all this evidence, and that was a lucky one. That was I rang a board member who just straight out denied it, that anything was going on. I think I've told this story before, and hung up the phone. I hung up the phone and went, oh, look, going to have to do a bit of work on this one. Board member texts me 2 minutes later, Caro knows a little but not a lot. Think it will break soon.
Fuck.
He texts the wrong person.
No.
And then he rang me and went, you just got a text from me, didn't you? It's pretty obvious. You can see what you've done. So, that made the front page an hour later, second edition. The Carey that was lucky. The Carey Anthony Stevens story, I knew about the day before it broke and didn't go with it that night because I just felt it was so big. I just needed a bit more evidence, even though I had the story. I spoke to one of the managers who had Anthony Stevens at his house that night. But I thought I needed to wait, and it broke the next morning. The players basically confronted him, and it was all over, and he left.
Yeah.
So you just always remember finding out that Malcolm Blight was about to be sacked from St Kilda. That was huge. And I remember ringing Malcolm Blight and having to ask him those phone calls that just make you sick to the stomach, when you've got to ask the hard question, and he was so hostile.
Yeah.
I just knew that I was right.
Yeah.
So, there's but getting interviews with people and talking about their issues as well, they're great stories. Look, probably the best one is when Mike Fitzpatrick, the chairman of the AFL, agreed to a sit-down interview with me.
Yeah.
He'd given one to Mike Hune at the Herald Sun the year before, and we were ropeable at the age.
Yeah.
And I sat in his office, and he got really hostile because I kept asking him about drug tests. It was in the West Coast Cousins era, and he told me they were going to start hair testing players. Oh, pretty good story. And
everyone started shaving their head.
finally, we don't condone drug use on this show, do we?
No.
Finally, he said, if this is going to be an interview about drugs, it's a waste. And I said, well, righto, what's your legacy, Mike? What do you want your legacy to be as the new chairman of the AFL Commission? And he said, well, there's been talk about a team maybe starting on the Gold Coast. We're going to do that in 2 years. And the year after that, we're going to launch a team in the west of Sydney. And, it's like that moment in All the President's Men when Deep Throat. But they always ask them to repeat the quote, and you're going, you never do that. You just almost pretend you haven't heard it. You don't want them to sort of go back on what they've just said.
Yeah.
And the interview ended, and he went on about what the plans were.
Yeah.
And he said at the end, so what do you think you've got out of that? I said, I think, it's a pretty good story about you've got to expand from 16 to 18 teams. He went,
Just so long as we're not talking about what's happening in WA right now.
I found out later that I'd like to thank my brilliant journalism and technique, but I think it was also a bit of I was there at the right time because he wanted to give the executives a kick up the bum and get them to get moving on it.
One thing I wanted to ask about, there's a fascinating book, Boys Club, about the way the AFL moves to kind of
Mick
work
Warner's
through,
book, yep.
to work through scandals and cover up scandals and move forward. Do you think, and I know this is a hard generalisation, but that the AFL has got more transparent with this sort of stuff, or have they just become a kind of smoother, slicker operation?
Oh God, no, they've become
worse?
less transparent. Yeah. I mean, the Mick Warner's big beef in the Boys Club, and I understand what he's on about because and with me, I was always just reporting it, and so was he, I guess. But they, under Gillan McLaughlin, and probably Andrew Demetria before him, there was always negotiated outcomes.
Yeah.
So I remember when Melbourne finally were caught tanking, and they had all this evidence, they fined them $1 million. And did something else. Did they take away draft picks? They might have. But they didn't accuse them of tanking. In fact, Gillan McLaughlin said, I don't really know what tanking means. So it was always, and same with their attempts, and probably this is the biggest story I've worked on and the one I'm proudest of is the Essendon drug scandal. Yep. And Mick and I have different views on who's to blame there and who performed badly. But I think we agree on a lot of it. And it was this push for a negotiated outcome that ended up hurting everyone. And then it widened and the international drugs authorities became involved and the AFL lost control and it was a disaster. But when you look at the changes since Richard Goyder's become chairman, I mean, before Richard Goyder, the CEO's wage was always in the annual report.
Yeah.
The numbers of illicit drugs positive tests was always given. Then they suppressed them. Like little by little, things are just being more and more suppressed. And I sort of have a view, and the guy who succeeded me as chief footy writer at The Age, Jake Nile, agrees with me. I mean, they act like they're a government agency now almost, or a government authority. And they're a non-for-profit organisation answerable to the 18 clubs, really, and all their other stakeholders. So they talk about the numbers with the TV rights, for example, and the money they're getting there, but so much is suppressed now. The money that goes to the clubs, you know, some clubs obviously get a lot more than others because the game is not equal and the clubs aren't equal. So, no, I think it's become way less transparent. Hopefully less of a boys' club, but bit of a way to go there too.
Yeah, with the boys' club thing's an interesting – I feel like I look at rugby union as a product and – they're finding their feet again after that Lions tour. Regardless of how the result went, they banked $120 million. They're in a good position to start, you know.
Just in the nick of time.
Just in the nick of time before a World Cup. And one of rugby union's problems was, and anyone will tell you this, whether they are the archetypical rugby supporter or they're the core or they're, you know, a jilted former fan that's lost touch, they'll tell you that it kind of became less and less accessible to a wider net of fans. You know what I mean? They kind of they didn't focus so much on the bush footy, or it ended up becoming very rugby union became very much focused on 4 or 5 schools in each city, became their kind of conveyor belts for talent. And they've now got a reverse on that and kind of look at what NRL's done. And what the NRL has done is interesting. Right now we're seeing the rise of Lebanese players in the NRL. You know, almost every team's got a couple of Lebanese boys from Western Sydney. And that followed the Polynesian rise. And I dare say we're going to see, you know, the African community getting involved in the next 10 to 20 years.
Hands off their ass.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm wondering, have you seen the AFL doing that, casting the wider net? Because I do remember in the 90s, you know, there was a lot more Greek boys and Italian lads getting around, second generation, and then all of a sudden you kind of squeeze back to where these kids are getting found, and it seems
a lot of private schools.
Yeah, smaller and smaller pool.
50% of the league, isn't it?
Yeah.
From
now, clearly you've got to factor in scholarship play. You know, and you know, like I mean, my son was at school with Stephen May, who went to Melbourne Grammar on a scholarship. So there's a lot of scholarship players who end up at private schools. Yeah. But I think it's a real problem for the AFL. Now, I think they've done a great job with the African community, and that was led by North Melbourne and their sort of area, their next generation academy. But now it's become, you know, a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as we sit here today, you know, Tanya Hosh has left the AFL and they haven't got a new sort of head of inclusion.
Yeah.
And they need to really promote that, I reckon. Yeah. And I hope they do. I'm sure they will. I mean, why are there no Indians playing football when there was such a massive Indian population in this country and certainly in Victoria? The Indigenous numbers are falling, and COVID was a bit of a legacy of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, with all the cuts, because, you know, high maintenance players were expendable.
Well. And you've got interstate kind of, you know, people who are effectively commuting back to, you know, where their family are, which during lockdown, that was, you just couldn't do that.
Yeah, but I mean, clubs need to spend more money on their Indigenous liaison officers. I know all the African players, men and women, get together now and have a catch up every few months, and they'd like not only a voice at the AFL, which they had, but I think he's gone to work for one of the under-18 clubs, but they would like a voice at every club. Yeah. And I hope one day they have one. Yeah. I think that certainly agree. I mean, Essendon, who fielded a Vietnamese player.
I saw that. Knew he was his name.
First full-blood Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Now, that is just extraordinary when you look at how many Vietnamese people went to that game.
Yeah.
It was against the Swans, I think.
Yeah,
and how many watched it and how exciting that was. And, the kid can play. So
It's good for business.
there are a lot of people doing the work. They spent a few years playing footy in South Africa, never really got anywhere. But now certainly the Sudanese largely, they're mainly the Africans who are playing, but so many Africans seem to be good at this game. I mean, it's fabulous. Not sure about Lebanese, certainly Europeans, European Australians, never been a shortage of them.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to see the changing demographics of Australia. You kind of see it on the TV and the media. You're now seeing it in politics. And for whatever reason, these sporting codes tend to be 5-10 years behind.
And 40%, I think, or 30%? No, there were 40 Irish women.
Yeah.
Playing in the AFLW. So
what about localism? Is that still such a big part of a club? I mean, I know that you go to Melbourne and you meet someone from Hawthorn who supports Richmond, and it's not necessarily by actual suburbs anymore or regions.
Clancy, I thought that was gone.
Yeah.
Until the Tigers broke the drought in 2017. I will never forget walking through the streets of Richmond that night,
right.
and again in 2019. It was just extraordinary, like every house.
Yeah.
And houses with, Dusty. There's a cafe with the Dusty portrait outside, Dustin Martin. There's houses with, black doors and black gates with the yellow sash. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And, it makes me sad that Essendon left their home in Napier Street and went out to Tullamarine, because I think where they are now is pretty soulless, even though it's a state-of-the-art facility, although there's clearly something wrong with the turf because they're all getting injured. And I love the fact that I know the Swans are boutique, but I love that they stayed so close to the SCG. Yeah. Port Adelaide are doing something similar. And I think there is that, look, it's a national game, but there's room for that tribalism. And I saw it at Richmond. You see it at Carlton when they start winning. Collingwood are no longer in Collingwood, and I think that's changed a bit, but it's still there. So, look, it's a mix, I guess.
I wanted to ask you about the AFLW. It's just kicked off. It's into its 10th year now.
It is.
Where do you see the game needs to improve and grow in that area? You mentioned NRLW just there before. I think this year and the last year as well, they had a couple of games in Newcastle, State of Origin, Women's State of Origin, pouring rain, like torrential rain, and the stadium was nearly packed out with fans getting around it. It seems to do quite well in terms of ratings and viewers, and there's a real buzz growing around the NRLW. Where do you see the AFLW needs to kind of grow and improve?
Well, it's a real headache for the competition, and I don't like the timing of the season. Now I know that they're adamant they're going to leave it at that time. It launches around now when we're all getting a bit sick of the home and away season. They get clear air in that end of the pre-finals bye that's coming up in about 2 weeks, 10 days. But I don't know, clubs, there is a lot of crossover with officials and people who work in both programs, and people are just tired in October, November. That's the way I feel about footy. We're ready for a break. Now, the AFL is looking for a new audience, and I understand that, but I dream of the day when they can play in the same seasons. I dream of the day when we have representative footy, the way they've already started it in NRL, because it's clearly a better product this year already. That's obvious. Yeah. There've been some unbelievable goals. Still, some kicking's not great, but it's going to get better. Obviously, it's costing the competition a lot of money, but even though I wrote a story about the $50 million loss year on year, and if they keep expanding it the way they do with games, up to 22 games, which the women want, in about 10 years, 5 years, they'll be losing $200 million. So,
but you got to pay. You got to pay to play.
Yeah, and culturally,
it's an investment. Right?
But if they'd spent the money 10 years ago, Sam Kerr wouldn't be in America. She wouldn't be playing for the Matildas either.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm just being the devil's advocate.
For sure.
But I know that Brisbane wouldn't have their new facility, the Lions, if they didn't have a women's team.
Yeah.
So many clubs have got government funding off the back of their AFLW teams. So many clubs have got some brilliant women administrators now because they're coming into the game. There are more women coming into the media because of AFLW. But against that, and memberships, etc. But I just don't like the timing of the season.
No.
So
when do you reckon?
And I think
like
we need
in that
state of origin.
February, March kind of dead period where people are just craving any kind of footy. Would that be? When would you play it?
I would love them to have their own TV deal with another network.
All right,
and play in the season.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Play during the season.
Yeah.
Channel 10, I don't know. I mean, Fox Footy would continue to broadcast, although they've got different owners now. I think they would continue to support it.
Yeah.
I just think I just know that the girls who are coming in and playing now, they've been playing since they were little kids.
Yeah.
So the quality is just going to get better and better.
Yeah.
But it's such a slow burn, and there are always. I mean, the AFL are right behind it, but are they doing enough? Look, the suburban grounds, people like that. I'd love to see them.
Free-to-air TV is a big thing too, right? It's helping the NRLW.
Big time, yeah.
Oh, well, Channel 7 are, they're doing 2 or 3 games a week. They're certainly doing Thursday nights. I would love to see them declare the grand final is going to be played here.
Yeah.
And, go back, whether it's the Adelaide Oval or the Gabba or, they own Marvel Stadium, for God's sake. Yeah. Why can't they just put some games on there, even if they get 5,000 people? Who cares for a home and away game?
Yeah.
Does anyone know if netball's struggling off the back of AFLW? I'm just thinking of the
doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
They're about to become potentially an Olympic sport.
Yeah.
Well, in a few years, in a few Olympics.
Yeah.
I think that every sport will struggle. It's going to be really tough.
Yeah.
I worry for athletics, particularly with AFL, with all the footy codes now embracing women and paying them more and more money. The next pay deal is going to be really interesting.
Athletics.
That's going to be a brutal negotiation for the AFLW women.
I'm sure there'll be some strong headlines around that and some healthy debate.
Let's just finish up with your 2025 predictions.
What do you want to know?
Who do you reckon's going to
Adelaide
make the grand final?
Oh, no, Brisbane will win the grand final. Brisbane will win the premiership.
Queenslander.
I think I can't see Nick Dacos being beaten for the Brownlow.
Yep.
Was that going to be your next question?
No, I was wondering which 2 teams make the grand final.
Oh, okay. No, I reckon Adelaide and Brisbane.
Yeah, right.
Yep, Adelaide and Brisbane.
And the Dogs, if they sneak in at 8, are they the dark horse or is it the Hawks? Who is not as fancy but could make a real run?
GWS.
Yep.
I like GWS. At their best, they're so good. They've just got injuries, but they're going to get players back. I know what you mean about the Bulldogs, and they'll probably, I think, get a home final. I mean, I probably should have mentioned Geelong. I mean, what an extraordinary team they've been again this year. They have had a soft draw, though, and that worries me.
Yeah.
So, no, I like Brisbane and Adelaide.
That'd be fun. That'd be good for the...
It's great for the game.
For the country, yeah.
Yeah, it's great for the game with all these expansion
I mean, the AFL
teams.
hope Collingwood, but I reckon they've shut their bolt.
Yeah.
Don't think they're going to make it now. So I think of all the Victorian teams, I think Geelong are head and shoulders above the rest. But it is even, Wendell. I mean, Hawthorn, I hope they do. I mean, they got to, they won one final last year and then Port beat them. Look, I reckon they could finish up in the top 4. I just don't see them making the grand final.
Yep. Okay. Fair.
And this is just lastly, this may be a disrespectful question to such a professional, but do you ever find yourself struggling with the whole Richmond thing? Are you a Richmond fan? Your family were?
Yeah, no, I don't. No, I reckon Richmond would say in their poor years I was tougher on them than I was on most clubs.
Right.
Probably, maybe that was because I went out, I was more angry about how poor they were.
Yeah.
I did my last full-time grand final, working full-time for the Age was 2017, and I probably, look, if I'm honest, it probably wasn't my best match report.
Yeah.
Because it was a very emotional day, and it wasn't a bad report, that deadline one that finishes up on page 1 the next day of the Sunday Age, but I just struggled to write about it.
Yeah.
I don't think I captured it as well as I actually could have.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, but that's also good to know that these footy riders are human and fans. And
but I used to loathe people who barracked in the press box. I mean, that is just a complete no-no. No, I'm sorry, can't cop that. Never did that. You do fall in love with the story though, more than your own childhood allegiances sometimes.
Yeah.
I adored the Swans, the Paul Roos premiership. I adored, the Brisbane premiership. There are some you just absolutely – I loved Port Adelaide and Mark Williams holding the tie up and, telling the sponsor he was wrong. I mean, you love those sort of stories as much as you love your own club winning. But
Richmond was one of the great stories, right, when they won. They've been
the drought
so
breaker.
Long. Yeah.
Yeah, 37 from 1980 and 37 years.
Yeah.
And, they were underdogs. I knew they were going to win, you just know.
Yeah.
And they just trounced Adelaide. I mean, what a story that was. Adelaide have only just recovered from that humiliation.
Dusty threw the ball to the young bloke who, though not the
No, that was 2019.
That was a not beautiful little narrative.
Yeah, that Marlon Pickett, his first ever AFL game.
Yeah.
Been in jail.
Yeah.
WA.
Dusty gave him the
made
ball.
his way through the waffle.
Yeah.
But drought breakers, the Bulldogs when they won it in 2016 or that was just extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, hopefully more fairy tales to come in the great game of Aussie rules.
Well, there's one every year, isn't there? There'll be some brilliant story between now and the end of September.
And if Brisbane wins, you just watch the way they carry on. Like
we won't foresee.
Yeah, we'll manufacture a fairy tale like we do every year with Origin. The Lions can get a taste of that too.
Who's going to win the NRL flag?
We're just talking about that.
It's about as open as the AFL.
The fairy tale is Canberra. The fairy tale would be Canberra Raiders. We had Willie Mason in here the other day, and he was saying it would be very special for Ricky Stewart to win as coach. And I'd never even thought of this. Willie Mason said 2002 was the premiership Ricky Stewart won with the Roosters, Sydney Roosters, and many people, I'd never heard of this before, view that as having an asterisk next to it because the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs were struck off because of their salary cap scandal.
Yep.
Kate McClymont uncovered. So, I mean, you've been kicked out of the comp because of a salary cap scandal. I don't know if there's an asterisk next to the team that went on to win it without you in there, but that's the baggage people carry.
That might be his own asterisk, I think.
I think that's a bit rough.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it seems very open. Like there's 4 really, really good teams, but they've all had pretty shocking losses. Like a lot of people now are saying Panthers are the favourites, but they lost a huge chunk of games. I think in round 12 they were bottom of the table.
Yes.
They've had an incredible run. 9
Raiders
in a row.
versus Penrith this weekend will be probably give people a bit more answers. But what people don't want to admit is if Penrith won again, that would also be a fairy tale of 5 in a row for.
Oh, and that's without.
Yeah.
Bit boring.
Everyone's over it.
I mean, they love 1.
Yeah.
They're pretty keen on 2. When you win a 3rd, everyone's right off you. That's what was my experience with Richmond. And Hawthorn went through that as well, and Brisbane.
Yeah. The 3. I mean, Brisbane, I often forget Brisbane made a 4th grand final at the end of that, after that 3-peat, and then they lost. We never even heard about the final.
No, but remember the AFL made them come down to Melbourne to play their preliminary final because they had an MCG deal.
Yeah.
Plus they had done a new deal with Channel 10. So Brisbane they were very poorly treated that year. And the AFL Commission and Demetrio and all the bosses famously left at halftime to go to the opera to see Andrea Bocelli.
That's bad.
It was a big scandal at the time. And Brisbane won. They beat Geelong, but then they had to go back to Brisbane and come back to Melbourne to play Port Adelaide, who'd stayed at home and won their prelim.
I imagine there's still a few people who are pretty filthy about that. Lucky they'd won 3 beforehand, I guess.
Yeah, Lee Matthews is still, I work with him every Saturday. He hasn't forgotten.
Never forget. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Caro. Really
I hope it was
appreciate
interesting.
No,
It was very interesting.
Caro, this is going to be a 2-parter, so when you guys leave, I'm going to introduce part 1 and part 2. I think this would be great to have 2 weeks of you heading into the grand final.
My street cred is just, gone off the charts, being on the Betoota Advocate, or what's it called, the Betoota Podcast.
Yeah, Betoota Talks.
Betoota Talks.
Yeah, we waffled on. We kept you here for much longer.
No, that's all right. I mean, it's fun. Who doesn't like talking about themselves? We're journos after all.
Thank you.